Why aren't these men playing golf or relaxing by the pool? They've found a new way to unwind after a hard day at the office. They don't go for the traditional trappings of success, sports cars, speedboats, or mega yachts. They go for something much more radical. They collect military hardware, tanks, guns, and even Scud missiles. Most people would never dream of owning a tank, but these tycoons are spending millions of dollars to satisfy their passion for heavy metal. Tanks are deadly fighting machines. They are masters of the battlefield, razing towns to the ground and pulverizing the enemy with an awesome range of weaponry. Tanks first entered the battlefield in World War I, and despite only having a top speed of 3 miles per hour, they revolutionized warfare. Tanks have now evolved from these lumbering machines into high-tech lethal killers, capable of firing high-explosive shells many miles and racing around at speeds of up to 60 miles per hour. They are not the sort of machine you'd think that people would drive for fun. You might even think owning one would be illegal, but it isn't. If you've got enough money, almost any military hardware can be acquired.
I'm Brent Mullins, and this is my M18 Hellcat.
Brent Mullins is an entrepreneur from Texas. He's made his fortune from hardware, military hardware. His company restores and sells tanks and jeeps.
This is a very potent weapon.
It's not just business, it's a passion.
Oh, it's a big thrill. It's great fun to fire. It's quite lethal. Quite lethal. You like to take a look at them?
His obsession with firepower began when he was still a boy.
I had an intense interest in all things military since I was 14 years old.
He started out with one Jeep, and now he owns military vehicles worth a cool $1 million.
This is a M18 tank destroyer that came from the former Yugoslavia.
Brent can spend over 2 years restoring a single vehicle, and he has a library of 30,000 tank manuals to make sure he gets every detail perfect.
This is a 1943 International Harvester high-speed tractor. This is Japanese anti-tank gun, M8 armored car, Dodge 3/4-ton weapons carrier, an M2 105mm howitzer. There's still quite a few of them being used in the world today, but there's very few in civilian hands, and this is one of the very few.
Brent's enthusiasm for tanks is driven by a passion to preserve American history.
Even though it seems like agony when we're working on it, it appears that the agony is what it's all about.
In his collection, there is one machine that is particularly special. It's a tank destroyer, the aptly named M18 Hellcat. Brent doesn't just like to preserve his tanks as museum pieces.
Here we go.
He likes to test them in action. Brent and a few like-minded buddies are off to some open land he owns to put the Hellcat through its paces, and more to the point, fire its guns. The Hellcat was the fastest tracked vehicle in World War II and can reach an astonishing 55 miles per hour. When Brent drives his high-speed toy, it makes all the years restoring it worthwhile.
Well, the first time we drove it is a pretty exhilarating experience since we've been working on it for over 2 years. It's the real feeling of accomplishment to bring these things back to life.
These tank destroyers were thinly armored and lightweight. Their job was to use their speed to sneak up and ambush enemy tanks. But if they got drawn into a slugging match with a larger, heavily armored tank, they didn't stand a chance. To make matters worse for the crews, they had open-topped turrets. Great for visibility, terrible for stopping incoming grenades. Strictly speaking, it is illegal in Texas to drive a tank on the highway. To get to the plot of land where Brent can play with his Hellcat means taking a short, covert trip down an unused road.
It's sort of frowned upon to drive tracked vehicles on the highway in Texas, but no, there's no license. There's no registration for tracked vehicles either.
It's not every day you see armored tanks racing down the road. Driving the M18 is fun, but the real attraction is showing off its true destructive capabilities. In other words, firing the guns.
Here we go. Contact. Fire in the hole! Holy shit, that was loud. You ready? You gonna shoot again? All right, good turn, Steven. Watch your head, I'm turning the turret.
Brent does have a firearms license, so he can legally fire live rounds. But on this occasion, these are blanks. Brent has synchronized the firing with explosive charges downrange to get highly realistic results. Fortunately, there are no neighbors to disturb. This is tank collecting, Texas style.
That was pretty awesome.
For most people, firing the Hellcat 76mm cannon would be the ultimate gun rush. But Brent likes something a little bigger. He has just the thing. This is the M2 105mm howitzer. It's the biggest firing gun in private hands in the United States.
Well, a trained crew can drive up, drop the gun, and be firing in just a minute or less.
Fire in the hole.
When it comes to firepower, Brent's the man.
I think we proved the point.
She's hot.
I like the 105. It's a lot of fun.
Fire in the hole.
Get a big bang for your buck there.
Okay, let's limber her back up.
But owning the M2 105 is not just about playing war games. For Brent, it's about preserving history.
This gun was made in 1943. It's a rare piece of American history.
Brent's desire to preserve America's military legacy means he keeps expanding his collection. But compared to the biggest collector in the world, Brent's tank collection is little league. When it comes to collecting military hardware, there is one man who is in a league of his own. He is Jacques Littlefield. 54-year-old Jacques is a billionaire. His father, Edmund Wattis Littlefield, made $2.2 billion from his Utah International Mining Company. Jacques manages the family investments, allowing him to indulge his passion for tanks, all kinds of tanks. Today, Jacques lives on his 500-acre estate outside San Francisco. It's home to his 25 cars, model railway network, and the largest collection of tanks in the world.
The M60A1 is the first real tank I ever drove when I was about 20 years old or so, back in the Detroit tank plant. So I have fond memories for M60s.
Tank technology may not be for everyone, but Jacques can't get enough of it. He loves every detail of their engineering, construction, and performance. Every detail.
After World War II, the U.S. went to, they called a cross-drive transmission, which had a torque converter and acted like an automatic transmission.
This is the M60A1. It is the most sophisticated tank in private hands. But for Jacques, it's a treasure trove of hydraulics, levers, and gadgets.
It has power assist in the transmission for steering, so it actually steers quite easily.
The M60 was the first tank to enter Kuwait City in the '91 Gulf War. But the thing that fascinates Jacques the most is its massive diesel engine.
This has about 750 to 800 horsepower. It's got a 1,790 cubic inch engine.
Jacques' collection started when he bought an M5A1 Stuart for $20,000 in 1982. Now it's blossomed into the largest private collection of military hardware on the planet.
When I moved up here, I was thinking it'd be a nice place to be able to have tractors and cars and maybe one or two tanks. I wasn't thinking in terms of hundreds of military vehicles. There are about a little over 215 at this point, of which 65 are actually tanks.
Jacques' amazing collection has grown out of a fascination with technology. Today, it's housed in a series of specially constructed, climate-controlled hangars.
Because I'm limited in space, I try not to have too many duplicates of what other collections would have lots of. So that's why you'll see in my case, I don't have a particularly good collection of many of the World War II or even current trucks or Jeeps.
Jacques collects tanks like some people collect baseball cards.
Well, let me show you in the building here. We have 4 buildings that we use for displaying the vehicles. All but 2 of the vehicles in these buildings operate, or at least they were running when we parked them, which I say kind of laughingly, but in some cases they'll crank right up.
Jacques is obsessed with each and every tank, all lovingly displayed in the hangar.
We try to arrange this building chronologically. As you'll see, the rest of the buildings don't have quite that much organization to them. So we start with the first U.S. production tank called an M1917. This is a German Panzer I Model A. It was the first of the German tanks produced in the 30s. This is the German Panzer IV. It was the most widely produced of the German tanks in World War II. Next to it you have the Sherman. In this case, this is an M4A1. It's the earlier style of Sherman. T-34-76, T-34-85, M60A1, German 222 reconnaissance armored car, Sturmgeschütz 3, Scud A, Scud B, Soviet long-track radar, 2S7 8-inch gun, the 14.5 millimeter quad Soviet anti-aircraft gun, British Conqueror, the largest tank ever produced.
Jacques' collection is not just the biggest private collection in the world, it is also the most valuable. A modest estimate would give it a value of over $20 million. But for Jacques, it's not about the money.
I've never added up in terms of what it's worth, nor have I added up how much I've put into it. I don't do this to make money, I do this because I like it. And so in some ways, I kind of joke with people that I'd prefer that the values be going down because then I could buy more stuff.
It's the collection that every other collector around the world looks up to. Fortunately, his wife, a former Miss Guatemala, is also a huge fan of his hobby.
Hi, sweetie. Just fine.
When Sandy married Jacques, she knew what she was getting into. Even their honeymoon involved tanks.
At the end of our honeymoon, we went to the tank factory that's part of Santa Barbara Systems there, and they drove us in their version of the Bradley, is an infantry fighting vehicle called the Pizarro.
I think it's eccentric and exotic, and clearly the best in the world, at least as a private collection goes. And I think it's extremely impressive that somebody could do something that is the best in the world, whether it's tanks or something else.
But Jacques is not just the #1 tank collector, he is also the leading restorer. He has built a special hangar in which to carry out his restoration projects and employs 3 full-time renovation experts. This part of the operation alone costs over $250,000 a year. They are currently restoring a Panther, a German World War II tank discovered in a lake in Poland. When it is finished, it will be the rarest and most valuable tank in the collection. But his collection of toys doesn't just include tanks. His extraordinary array of heavy-duty equipment contains anti-aircraft guns, bazookas, rocket-propelled grenades, lethal cannons, and even Scud missiles, potentially capable of firing warheads hundreds of miles.
It's a short-range ballistic missile, good for several hundred miles, not particularly accurate.
Jacques has 2. They weren't easy to get hold of. This one was initially confiscated by U.S. Customs. It was only returned after he could prove that it was permanently disabled. But one piece Jacques owns surpasses all others. It's capable of firing nuclear ammunition and is the largest tracked armored vehicle on the planet. This is the Soviet 2S7. It weighs in at an amazing 46 tons. Jacques is turned on by its sheer size.
Well, it's certainly one of the favorite pieces in the sense that it's big and it's got lots of neat stuff on it. It is about the biggest piece I have in terms of overall length.
At 42 feet long and 11 feet wide, the only place Jacques can play with it is in this small field.
Probably the only one in America, maybe the only one in the Western world. Of course, you can't drive it on the road, at least not here in the United States, so it's just like owning a tractor. There's a lot of extra weight on the end.
Its 203mm cannon is the biggest mobile gun ever built. It is capable of firing a 240-pound projectile a staggering 30 miles. The cannon is 30 feet long and can be raised to a height of 40 feet by the gunner using a hydraulic winch. That's the height of a 4-story building.
It can fire a high-explosive conventional round or a rocket-assisted high-explosive round, and it can fire a nuclear round. I assume that there are other types of rounds as well, but I don't know, like maybe smoke or chemical, but I haven't read that much on it. There's not a lot printed about these vehicles.
Thankfully, Jacques' interests lie more in its gear ratios and cooling systems rather than the colossal supergun's nuclear capabilities. While Jacques enjoys driving the largest armored vehicle ever built, for another tank fanatic in another part of the world, it's all about speed. Meet Simon Blagden, an eccentric British multimillionaire. Simon is an ex-soldier who fought in the Falklands. He made his fortune in the telecommunications industry. He now lives in a magnificent chateau in France, worth millions of dollars. Today, he's back in uniform for a unique journey. He is traveling across the English Channel to his home in the Somme region of France. Most people would do it by car. Tycoons would probably do it by private jet or helicopter. But this tycoon is leaving his helicopter at home and traveling in his latest toy, a Scorpion tank. Simon's tank is a lightweight reconnaissance vehicle weighing 9.5 tons. It may be small, but it's very fast and used by cavalry units in the British Army.
I've always wanted to drive a tank, and so I thought, well, now I've got the opportunity, I'll learn to drive it and to buy one as well, and it's really just a toy, nothing else.
It may seem strange, but unlike in the US, it is legal for Simon to drive his tank along highways in the UK. All he needed to get was a license for vehicles with tracks. That usually means driving a bulldozer. For Simon, it's 9.5 tons of lethal hardware. It's not the sort of vehicle most people would choose to take out for a spin. It's great in a straight line, but corners can be tricky. For such an epic journey, Simon's only had a short time to master his new vehicle.
The Army teaches people in 3 weeks to drive a tank, and I did it in 3 hours. So you can imagine my level of competence isn't very good.
To get to France, Simon needs to take the ferry across the English Channel, but he's running late. Luckily for him, the Scorpion is the fastest tank in the world, with an official top speed of 65 miles per hour. Somehow he's managed to get it over 70. Simon is crossing the channel on a regular car ferry. Booking a ticket for the Scorpion wasn't easy.
Didn't have a place on the booking form on the internet for tank.
The girl in the ticket booth isn't too impressed. It's not every day you check in a tank. Getting the tank on board proved surprisingly easy. No one wanted to argue with a tank or its eccentric driver. But will it be as easy getting into France as it was to get out of England?
Not used to seeing vehicles like this. The last time we took in an armoured car, it took us about 45 minutes to clear the customs, so we'll see what happens. I think there's three options. Option one is we get through without any trouble. Option two is we have to negotiate our way. Or option three is we get turned back. There is an option four, which is you just close the hatches and let them shoot at you, but I don't think that was very good for entente cordiale, really.
When the ferry arrives in France, Simon prepares to disembark, watched by carloads of surprised holidaymakers. Simon's bizarre mode of transport is attracting a lot of admirers, and he's loving it. He's made it to France, but only time will tell if he'll get his instrument of war to his chateau. Fort Knox, Kentucky. And while most people might prefer to play a round of golf, some tank fanatics are playing with their favorite toys.
Fire!
I can't see owning one if I can't take it out and play with it and run it. I don't collect anything that I can't shoot or I can't run.
This is John Shoup. He's a civilian, and this is his hobby. John owns two M5A1 Stuart tanks worth over $100,000.
Beautiful.
A machine gun enthusiast from Missouri, John has brought his tanks to Fort Knox for a weekend of war games.
Never know when you might need your trusty shotgun.
John is 51 years old, and he just loves his tanks. He's part of the 14th Armored Division, a group of civilian hobbyists whose idea of fun is to blast thousands of shells at each other.
Go in that area. You need to fight from that area, to die in that area, and once the tank stops...
John and his buddies carry out battle reenactments every couple of months, but big events like this only take place twice a year. Some reenactors like to play the Allies, and others the Nazis. To make it feel real, some of the Nazis have even learned German. This is a big operation. 7 different groups have turned up with nearly 300 individuals and 10 armored vehicles. Some have come from as far away as California. Anyone can come and play, as long as they have a tank or some other suitable military hardware like a M5A1. The M5A1 Stuart is a lightweight and fast tank, armed with a 37mm main gun and 3 30-caliber machine guns. They were used by Patton's Third Army after the Normandy landings and achieved great success in North Africa during the Desert Campaign against Rommel. John might own 2 of the 14th Armored Division's tanks, but the man who maintains them is excitable tank nut Tim Garrett.
Hey, you stupid good for nothing! Look what you're doing!
Tim's also the platoon leader and will be in charge of the unit's 4 tanks in battle. This is no cheap hobby. Today's battle involves over $1 million worth of vintage hardware. And it's not like they can drive down to the local auto repair shop to fix a fender if they have a crash.
Right, I control the whole unit as much as I can in order to ensure that we don't have difficulties with the tanks doing anything unrealistic or, more importantly, unsafe. We've never run one tank into another. We don't know what it would do, but it couldn't be good.
I'm responsible for a lot of the guns because I own them and I maintain them. So if they, and a lot of the guys in our unit are not gun guys. We're gonna go hot here for a second. Okay, that took care of that one.
This is a serious business, and wives and partners have to learn to join the party or get used to being home alone.
This is my wife, Pam, She's operated in the loader position, the bow gunner position, and the driver position of the tank. She's fully qualified. She knows how to operate the radios and the intercoms, and she mechanics with us every Tuesday night on tank night.
Most help I do with the mechanics is just mostly hand tools, clean things.
I haven't run into another woman that can handle a machine gun quite like Pam. There are times when I call her for help when my machine gun won't operate properly because she's better at breaking them down than a lot of the people that I've met.
Now that's true love.
Okay, stand by.
For John, his tanks are more than museum pieces.
Fire in the hole!
There's the guys that restore these things to just the ultimate detail. Those guys will not bring their vehicles out and run on an event like this. They look pretty good. They sit static, they never run, and so consequently they're not able to run like we do. And then there's the utility guys. We're utility guys. We restore them, we get them to as close as we can possibly get to being absolutely correct. They're mechanically sound, and we can actually take them out and run them hard. And we use them like they did in World War II. It's exciting when the engines get running and everybody's ready to go. Here we go. Let's get ready to rumble. The war has begun.
Mock battles can still be a deadly game. Although they're not using live rounds, the blast from a blank fired from the M5A1's cannon can cause severe burns. There are always medics on hand. And fortunately for the 14th, they've never had an accident. This is not exactly your average day out. This is all about noise, smoke, and guns. The 14th Armored Division is taking on a sizable German force, which includes a powerful tank destroyer, the Hetzer. The reenactment will play out like a real battle. The M5A1s deploy on a reconnaissance mission to locate the German armor.
Oh, there he is. He's in the woods.
The strategy is simple. A full-scale assault followed by a mop-up exercise. But things don't go to plan. The first blood goes to the Germans. Their superior firepower takes out an American armored vehicle. And worse, the M5A1s are being outgunned by the German Hetzer and are forced to regroup.
Let's go, let's go, let's go. Back her up, Mike, straight on. Tim's right to sweep the bunker and the tree line. Over.
Safely out of the Hetzer's range, John orders the 14th to outflank the German armor.
We're going to be lead tank now, Mike, so you just take the lead and go with it. You know where to go.
In one last attack, the 14th Armored Division uses their speed to outmaneuver the slower Hetzer.
Gunner, target that Hetzer and fire! Fire! Fire now! Fire! 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 Quick! Fire!
A staggering 30,000 rounds of ammo later, and the 14th Armored Division is victorious.
Pretty much accomplished our mission at this point.
War games don't come cheap. The 14th Armored spent around $28,000 on this event alone.
We had real good luck. Our hydraulics worked great. Our interphones worked really good. And I thought it went really well. The Hetzer didn't follow the scenario, no, but you know, that's to be expected. We put about 15 good aimed shots into it. I thought that went really well. Good. What do you think?
I think it went great.
I think we're getting the hang of it.
I think it went great. And I just took off ahead of you guys because I thought you guys were wasting time.
I was glad that you did. Everybody's got to have initiative. You know, when in doubt, attack the enemy.
After their day of fun, the unit starts the long process of cleaning up. If they leave any of the corrosive residue in the barrels, they could become damaged and stop firing.
When you lay that gun across a German vehicle and squeeze off a couple of quick main gun rounds, or fire the coax into a large group of German infantry, particularly the ones that are reenacting as SS, there's no better feeling than that. That's one of the things I like about reenacting American United States Army armor, is that we know what side we're on, we know we're fighting a good fight, and I'm much more comfortable with that than I would be anything else.
Tim's the spark plug. He's the guy, keeps everybody moving. He has the big vision, you know, and he's kind of the spark plug of the unit, so.
Yeah, get some!
And the unit needs that. We need somebody that can do that.
There's a huge adrenaline rush because you get the smells, the sounds, and the feeling of battle. You get the bruises, you get the sounds through your communication gear, the smell of the shells that are going off. It's all there. It's as real as you're going to get without actually getting shot. And the uniforms and all the authentic equipment bring you to the point where you are there.
But for John, it's nothing to what tank commanders face during real combat.
I don't think we can ever approximate what deadly fire is really about. Facing a dedicated enemy with usually a lot of bigger guns than you've got, I don't think we could ever recreate that.
John sees their reenactments as a way of reminding people of the extraordinary courage of the soldiers who fought in World War II.
It's out of a great deal of respect and admiration for the veterans that we're even able to do this. I mean, if it weren't for their efforts, we wouldn't be here doing this.
One man who has seen the horrors of real tank warfare firsthand is ex-tank commander Fred Ropke.
I'm Fred Ropke, the Tank Baron.
Fred saw combat in the Korean War and was the first serious tank collector in the United States. Today, his passion for tanks is still very much alive.
Well, I really don't like to talk about how many tanks I have because I don't want people to know how crazy I am, but I have a lot of tanks, we have a lot of armored car, and we have a lot of tactical vehicles. It's just kind of a collection that got out of control.
After leaving the military, Fred turned his talents to business, making millions from his printing and graphics company. Today, he lives on his vast estate outside Indianapolis, which includes a private lake for his boats and even a runway for his aircraft. Fred's filled the property with military equipment, the same way some people might fill their attic with comic books.
If you lived in a condominium in downtown New York City, obviously we wouldn't be collecting what we're doing here. I think we have more than a lot of South American countries, and I think we probably control South America if we really wanted to.
Fred knows that it wouldn't look good if one of his tanks went missing, so he's big on security.
Actually, 9/11 was a focal point for all of us. When you're collecting this kind of aggressive military equipment, you're reminded that we have a serious responsibility. We keep our gates locked. We don't leave the gates open.
Fred's reputation means no one is going to mess with him or his collection.
Anybody that comes down my driveway, if they've got an ounce of sense, would realize that old Fred Ropke is not exactly the guy you want to knock off.
Fred's days as a tank commander sparked a lifetime passion for military hardware. But his favorite piece is the M26 Pershing, the one he served in over 50 years ago during the Korean War.
Over here is one of my really favorites, is the M26 Pershing tank, which came along and really saved our butts during Korea. We went up against the Soviet T-34-85s, and we could defeat the Soviet with no trouble whatsoever, because this tank has heavier armor than the 85 did, and they were very surprised. Then a tank against tank, we came out ahead every time.
The real key to the Pershing's success was its massive main gun. It could fire a 24-pound high-explosive shell over 12 miles. The Pershing also had 3 machine guns used for attack and defense. They could take out infantrymen and small vehicles, but also defend against anyone brave enough to try to climb on the tank.
To keep the enemy from jumping on your tanks and throwing a hand grenade down somewhere, or a Molotov cocktail that they were using, gasoline with a burning rag and throwing in, you sometimes would have to spray your own tank, other tanks, to protect people from climbing on them. And the .30 caliber wouldn't put a tank out of business, but it would sure clean the people off of it if they were on there.
It's decades since Fred left the military, but stepping into his commander's cupola brings back the instincts he relied on to take the 46-ton tank into combat.
As a tank commander, you're responsible for your entire crew, the discipline of your crew, and the actual firing of the main gun, where the biggest threat always is obviously being hit or set on fire.
It may be 50 years since he commanded his purging in anger, but the horrors of tank warfare are still very much with him to this day.
If you want to disable it, stop it, you blow the track, and then you immediately put a round in where the turret hits the hull to jam the turret. So if the tank can't turn towards you and it can't move, you can take your time and finish it off.
Fred remembers all too well what can happen if your tank is hit.
But if a round comes in and can pierce the turret, good chance it won't go out the other side. It'll just ricochet around inside, and that's very deadly.
For Fred, tanks represent the horrors and the heroism of war. And his experiences of fighting in the front line have shaped his life. For years, the dangers of tank battles have been immortalized by Hollywood. To create realistic battles, film producers need hundreds of tanks, armored vehicles, and weapons. And when there's a film to make, they turn to Renault and André Velouza. These brothers have been supplying Hollywood with tanks for over 30 years. They not only collect tanks, they build them as well.
This is our yard of tanks.
Yeah, this is where we keep all of our heavy metal.
This is the T-72 mock-up that we did for the movie Red Dawn. And then we later used it in Rambo 3.
Here's another one. This was another vehicle built for the movie Red Dawn. That's a BTR-60. This is an M48A3. This is the one we used in Dragnet and Naked Gun 2.5 with Leslie Nielsen.
Have a nice day.
Those were the little cars that was chasing the robot in Short Circuit. That one right there, the M75, that was in the Blues Brothers in Chicago.
Here's the Jeeps and stuff we used in MASH, you know, all those action shows back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. We've got about 400 military vehicles in our inventory.
Started with one, and then when they're getting somebody call up for rent the tank, you wouldn't happen to have two. I said, no, but we can find another one, and it just kind of grew from that. And then some of the tanks we couldn't find, we just have to build them and make them look like what the picture would call for.
This is a Centurion tank. This was first used in the movie Courage Under Fire.
The Centurion weighs in at an astonishing 50 tons. That's more than 40 family sedans. It was the main battle tank of the British Army from 1945 until the 60s. Its heavily armored body meant it wasn't the fastest, but its strength was its ability to hit any object and keep on going. It is also proving a success in the movie business because it's readily available, making it the perfect tank for the brothers to adapt into rarer models.
We got 12 of them from Australia, and we converted these things into the M1 style tank, which we'll show you, because it was bigger in size than anything that we had or that you could get a hold of a volume of. Like 12 is a sizable number for tanks. So we did a thin, here's a rock. We did a thin skin, as they call it. And so, but on the original, these things here, that's solid armor underneath that. Well, they're really dependable. They have gas engines in them, Rolls-Royce gas engines, and normally start every time. And we found out through even the history books and stuff on these Centurions, it was a really, really reliable tank, and they use them still around the countries and other countries in the world right now today. Come on in the office. I'll show you what we do in here. This is where we kind of like sit down and figure out what we're going to do with these vehicles, and we'll get out all of our research books and all the little models, and start sizing them up to see how we're going to make these things work. So what we've got out here right now is some of the Panzers and some of the little tanks and the M1s and for the size of their bodies that's on here. Then we'll take them and we'll take the bottom half off these and we'll set them on to something a chassis that we have to see if it's going to fit before we go out here and start cutting up these main tanks out here.
After careful redesigning in the office, it's down to business in the workshop.
Oh yes, this is our specialty room. This is where we keep all of our small things that we build for the tanks that we mock up and things. We build weapons. We build 50 caliber machine guns. We could probably make 50 of these a day. This is just made out of wood and then iron screw. But from a little distance, it looks really good. And it has the handles. And actually, when you put them on a tank, you have a man up there at the top, and he'll move it around, and you can't tell. But if they're going to really do any firing, this will be removed, and a fella that has gun license will put the real one up there, and he'll go through it and shoot blanks. And that's what we like to do. And it's a business. It's a specialized business.
Over 3 decades, they've worked with pretty much everyone in Hollywood.
Arnold Schwarzenegger,
Chuck Norris,
The Incredible Hulk,
Patrick Swayze,
Sylvester Stallone,
Gary Busey,
Denzel Washington,
Robert Conrad,
Goldie Hawn,
John Travolta.
Boy, give me a couple hours, I have to make you a list because we've done so many movies.
Gee, the list goes on and on.
Just a lot of nice people, yeah.
The tanks they supply are not just static props, they are fully active machines. Over the years, they have developed a reputation as fearless tank stunt drivers, jumping vehicles, and of course, crushing them. No car is safe with the Velusats around.
Well, this is the day. I think we got her all serviced, all ready to go, all checked out. And we flipped the coin and I lost and you're driving.
Let me see if it'll start.
Let's see if she'll crank and then I'll put you in position.
Let's go.
Let's try it. We rigged the car and my brother's gonna run over this car and we're gonna just flatten it out.
Let's get in and try to start it.
Let's try to start it.
Okay, ready?
Today's victim is a Pontiac Grand Prix. It was featured in the TV series The Dukes of Hazzard, but its showbiz life is about to come to an abrupt end. It's time for the brothers to stop clowning around and start getting serious.
Okay.
Crushing cars is a lot of fun, the perfect way to relieve executive stress.
Yeah.
Take a look.
Oh yeah,
that's what 52 tons would do. How's that, boys?
Right down to the frame.
This is the usual scene. Devastation. Yeah, sometimes the hubcaps just fly right off these things.
I don't think the car knew that was what was really happening. It was just boom, there it was. Once the tank touched it, it owned that car. That was exciting.
That was pretty neat.
That was awesome.
While the brothers are having fun in Hollywood, back in France, intrepid tank driver Simon Blagden is about to encounter the French authorities. Simon, our British millionaire, is driving his Scorpion tank from the UK to his chateau in France. He made it across the English Channel, but now he must get past French customs, more used to tourists than tanks.
Bonjour. 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 Bienvenue. Bonjour, monsieur. Bonjour. As you see, we've been greeted very, very warmly by our French friends. And from here, we're going into the centre of Calais. I believe the mayor's going to be waiting for us there.
Simon's luck holds out, and the bemused French police escort the tank through customs and into the town. Because his tank is a legally registered vehicle in Britain, Simon has the right to drive it on any European road, whether they like it or not.
I'm trying can use it for helping in the garden and things like that, but she doesn't believe me.
But before Simon goes any further, he has to make a familiar pit stop.
Refueling this is very much like a car. You go to a petrol station and fill it up. It's just the order of magnitude of the size of the bill that's different. So we're just going to fill up. We shouldn't have too much to put in it. It holds 98 gallons, which is quite a lot.
That's like filling up a four-door sedan 8 times over.
Yeah, so most petrol pumps cut out at 100 litres, which means if you've got it empty, it takes about 3 or 4 full fill-ups to get it full. Fuel consumption's not too good. It does about 4 miles to the gallon. Well, I think we'll have done about 180 miles by the time we get there. I guess the Green Party wouldn't be very pleased with me.
His fuel tank full and his wallet lighter, $463 to be exact, Simon heads for his chateau in the Somme, an area where over 1 million soldiers died during World War I.
I live here in the Somme, and as you travel through the countryside of the Somme, it's impossible to go more than a couple of miles without coming across a memorial or a cemetery. And there's so many people who unselfishly gave their lives during the wars. And it's very important that we remember these people and that, you know, we don't lose sight of the history.
Simon is not doing this trip just for laughs. He is raising money for the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, the charity that maintains the hundreds of war cemeteries and monuments dotted all over France.
Just ahead of us now is Steeple, and that's the British Memorial. So it's a particularly important monument for the British soldiers.
He's laying a wreath at each of the major monuments on his route. As an ex-soldier who has seen combat, he understands the costs of war only too well.
It's quite a poignant memorial. There's about 76,000 names here of soldiers who have no known grave. And as you get close to it, you'll see that each one of the white faces there is just covered in names.
Having made it across the English Channel, down through the French countryside, stopping at all the major war monuments, Simon, his buddies, and his Scorpion tank are finally at his French residence, the magnificent chateau. He's greeted by a party of veterans who wish to honor his trip and the $27,000 he has raised for charity.
So we're home. We've been on the road 2 days now. It's been a great journey, and I think you know, this was just incredible. This reception here. It almost feels like it's part of you after 2 days. You know, you don't really want to leave it alone and get out of it. I'm just wondering if I can actually drive it to work or not. Thirsty work, your good health. Cheers. Thank you.
Collecting tanks may seem to many people a strange hobby. But for some individuals with the time and inclination, it seems a perfectly natural way to spend their money.
I want to take care of history.
I smell the exhaust and hear the gunfire. That has a whole different appeal.
Any man thinks this is pretty neat.
So it's pretty exciting.
It's when that phone rings and they call for an Army tank.
I guess I feel, it makes me feel special, I guess.
I see it as a toy and nothing else. Just something to have a bit of fun in.
For wealthy lovers of serious military hardware, tanks are the ultimate Tycoon toys.